This semester, I was given the opportunity not only to teach 5th grade students in mathematics, but I was also able to learn alongside them. Putting lesson plans together is something that is fairly new to me as an education major. This is my first semester with classes that teaches me how to create a lesson plan off of a certain content. After this semester, I can say with confidence that I have learned more than I imagined I would. I feel confident in writing lesson plans as well as putting those into teaching students in a real setting. Going into this experience at Lee Elementary School, I was a bit nervous, but now I know that I shouldn't be, and I am now more excited rather than nervous. I have also grown in my knowledge on how to differentiate my lessons based on different students' learning, because of the fact that every single student learns in a different way. Every student learns differently and at a different pace. This is something that I want to take in my future classroom because as a future teacher, I understand that I cannot teach my class in just one way. Every student has a unique zone of proximal development, which is a range of knowledge that may be out of reach for the individual to learn alone, but is accessible if the learner has the support of peers or more knowledgeable others, said by Vygotsky in 1978. My students need to be taught in different forms so that they can understand based on their unique learning process. Another skill that I learned that I plan on taking with me to my future classroom is that learning is social. This is something that I got to visually see while teaching my lesson plans this semester at Lee Elementary School. Out of my 3 students, one was more advanced compared to the other 2. The sociocultural theory positions the learner as being actively engaged during the learning process, and by this, the students that struggle more will learn from the students that are more advanced. In all of the lessons that I taught, I was able to notice that the learners that struggled more received help from the more advanced student. From this, I loved seeing that students will help each other. Collaborating is key for success. Collaboration in teaching is a big thing that teachers need to understand, as well as students being able to collaborate with each other. I made sure to provide opportunities for my students to collaborate during each lesson, such as playing games where they can communicate with each other about mathematics, or having phone a friend cards for them to use if they got stuck on a problem. These are 2 of many examples on how you can provide the opportunity for communication between students. During each lesson, I made sure to also collaborate with my students to check for understanding and have my students talk with me about any confusion that they have. I realized that collaborating while teaching relates to me planning how I will move forward with the lesson and how I will plan my next lesson based on if they understood the current lesson. If one of my students had some confusion on the content, I made sure not to move on completely until I knew that the student understood. This flexibility is important for teachers to understand and is something that I've learned from this experience. This was done by reviewing, working through problems step by step, and using other students to help eliminate the confusion that was there. One example that shows my awareness of flexibility and responsive to my students' needs was when one of my students, Alex, was having trouble during a group game. I noticed that he knew the concept and was able to do it on his own. Although as soon as we started playing bingo for guided practice, they were to solve a problem on their own, while the remaining students were to wait for him to finish, and then the next student was to go. Alex seemed to feel pressure and got confused while the other 2 were watching him complete the problem. When I noticed this, the following lessons, I decided to have all of the students complete each problem rather than one at a time. The next time there was a group game, and this was tried out, it went much better and Alex did not feel pressured by the other 2 students watching him complete a problem. Assessment is a key component to teaching, and not only in mathematics. Teachers assess to monitor progress, evaluate achievement, make instructional decisions, and evaluate progress. As teachers, we want to identify where they are, identify where they need to be, and figure out how to get them there and close the gap. Assessment is a crucial part of every lesson plan. I used assessment in my lesson plans to gather evidence about my students and from that decide where to go from there in my teachings. I used the formative assessment approach, which consists of the ongoing big picture of checking to see where they are. For each lesson I taught, I used either a checklist or a rubric along with notes, observations, and the thumbs up, thumbs down approach. The checklist and rubrics helped me at the end of the lessons to determine whether my students mastered the objective and what I should teach the following week. If at least one of my students did not master the objective, the following week I would review the previous concept to make sure they understood before moving on. The notes, observations, and thumbs up, thumbs down approach helped me during the lessons on whether they understood what they were being taught at the time. If at least one of my students did not understand, I took the time to work with that student one-on-one to make sure we cleared up the confusion. The application of content and process standards is what intertwines to bring us to the point of our development as mathematics teachers. The content standards are what we teach to our students: numbers and operations, data analysis and probability, measurement, algebra, and geometry. The process standards are how we as teachers can teach these content standards, with communication, connections, representation, reasoning and proof, and problem solving. You can create a learning environment for your students and set them up for success in mathematics. After this experience at Lee Elementary, I have learned that all of our process standards were used in the process of lesson planning and teaching our students at Lee Elementary. My students used problem solving by building mathematical knowledge and solving problems that were in my lesson plans. The students used reasoning and proof to make sense of what they were learning in the lessons while the concepts developed over time. Representations are a huge need for students to understand math. Manipulatives, graphs, diagrams, symbols, and anchor charts are a few things that were used in the lessons for the students to understand the concepts in multiple different ways. Communication is key for the students to use with each other as well as use the teacher. I made sure to give my students plenty of ways to communicate with each other and myself to help them. They engaged in communication through explaining their ideas, thoughts, and reasoning verbally, in writing, and through representations. Connections were made between new ideas that they learned that connect with prior mathematical learning. After learning about adding fractions, they were able to use some of the knowledge and vocabulary to learn about subtracting fractions. These are all integral components of all mathematics teachings and learning. After the experience of teaching students at Lee Elementary School, I have learned much more than I expected to. I took away many things that I can use in my future classroom, and I am grateful to have had this experience.